I still remember that night, October 29th, 2025, as if it were yesterday. The rain was relentless, pounding the city streets like 1,000 tiny hammers. I was just an ordinary man, driving home from another long day at the warehouse, thinking about my mother waiting for me with dinner on the stove. Life felt so routine, so predictable. Then, in one violent instant, everything changed. The sound of screeching tires, the blinding flash of headlights, and suddenly I was gone. For 17 minutes, my heart stopped beating. My lungs no longer drew breath. The doctors called it clinical death. But what I experienced was far more alive than anything I'd ever known. When my soul left my body, there was no confusion, no pain, just a weightless stillness. I could see the wreckage below me, the flashing red lights, the paramedics working frantically, but none of that held me anymore. I was being drawn toward a light, not like the weak glow of a lamp, but a living, breathing radiance. And in that light, I felt a presence so real, so familiar, it made every fear melt away. It was Jesus. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through every part of my being. It was like hearing truth itself speak my name. I had always believed in God. I went to church on Sundays, said my prayers before bed, but in that moment I realized belief is one thing, encounter is another. When you truly meet Jesus, you don't just know about him, you know him. His eyes looked right into me, past every mistake, every regret, every secret I thought I had buried. Yet, what I found there wasn't judgment, it was love. Love so powerful it felt like it was rebuilding me from the inside out. As I stood in his presence, I understood something I had never grasped before. Life on earth is fragile, but the soul that's eternal. We spend so much time worrying about our careers, our houses, our schedules, but how often do we think about where our spirit will go when all of that fades? Death isn't the end, it's a doorway. And what waits beyond depends on the choices we make while we still have breath. When I came back, when the doctor said my heart had started again, they called it a miracle. But I knew it was more than that. It was a calling. God had given me back those 17 minutes not as a story of tragedy, but as a testimony of grace. Sometimes it takes the moment when everything stops for us to finally start truly living. My message to you is simple. Don't wait for a crash. Don't wait for a miracle. Start now. Live like heaven is real, because I've been there and I promise you it is. You are the storyteller. Tell your own story, in the voice and style of Joel. The next moment after the crash, I found myself standing in a place that words can barely touch. Everything around me shimmered not with ordinary light, but with a living brilliance that seemed to pulse with love. It wasn't cold or distant, it was warm, alive, and more real than anything I had ever known. Then through that radiance I heard a voice gentle yet commanding, like thunder wrapped in kindness. It called my name, Jacob, and in that instant I knew whose presence I was in. It was Jesus. No introduction was needed. My soul recognized him. You see, when you meet the one who created you, there's no confusion, no fear, only an overwhelming sense of being fully known and fully loved at the same time. I couldn't see his face clearly at first, because the light around him was too bright, but as my eyes, if you could call them that, adjusted, I saw eyes that carried eternity in them. Eyes that saw every mistake I had made, every moment of doubt, every time I had fallen short, and yet they didn't condemn me. They embraced me. It was as if all the questions I had ever asked found their answer in one look. His presence carried both the power of a king and the tenderness of a father. Then he spoke again, and his words went straight to the core of my being. My child, I have brought you here because my people must understand what is coming. The great tribulation is near, And there are instructions I gave that many have forgotten. I remembered trembling not from fear, but from awe. I said, Lord, why me? I'm no preacher, no prophet. I'm just an ordinary man. He smiled. And it wasn't the smile of a stranger, it was the smile of someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself. I have always chosen the humble, he said, because the message, not the messenger, carries the power. I realized something profound in that moment. God doesn't wait for us to be qualified before he calls us. He calls us, and then he qualifies us through his grace. Maybe you felt unworthy, unprepared, like your past disqualifies you from purpose, but friend, that's not how God sees you. He sees potential where others see ordinary. He sees destiny where you see doubt. In that radiant light, Jesus told me to return and share his warning with the world. He didn't promise it would be easy, he promised it would be worth it. As his presence surrounded me, I felt a new kind of strength rising inside, a courage not born of confidence, but of surrender. That encounter changed everything. I left knowing that when heaven speaks, even the most ordinary life can carry an extraordinary message. In that holy light, Jesus reached out his hand, and suddenly the world around us shifted. I wasn't standing in heaven anymore, I was overlooking Jerusalem. The city gleamed under the golden sun, alive with people, tourists, families, merchants shouting in the streets. It looked peaceful, almost ordinary, but something in the air felt different, heavy as if creation itself was holding its breath. Jesus stood beside me, his eyes filled with both love and sorrow. Watch closely, Jacob, he said. What you are about to see will change everything. I looked down at the Temple Mount, that sacred ground where heaven and earth had once met, and saw a man walking through the crowd. At first glance, he looked like the kind of leader the world had always wanted, confident, charismatic, the kind of person who could calm nations and inspire hope. People cheered as he passed, their faces lit with admiration. Yet deep within me, something recoiled. His presence carried an emptiness, a darkness dressed in light. He walked straight into the temple, surrounded by guards and officials, and as he reached the inner court, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if the air thickened with dread. Then he lifted his hands and spoke words that shook the heavens. I am God, worship me. The moment those words left his lips, everything changed. It was as though a dam had broken and darkness poured out across the earth. I could see demonic forces unleashed, swarming, spreading, twisting through every corner of the world. Jesus' voice broke through the chaos. This is the abomination of desolation, the moment when the man of sin reveals himself. My heart ached as I watched. Some people fell to their knees in worship, believing they had found their Savior. Others froze in confusion, not knowing what to believe. But then I saw a small remnant, men, women, children, scattered across nations whose spirits recognized the truth. Their faces were filled with shock, but also determination. These are my faithful ones, Jesus said. They know the scriptures. They have been watching. They will know what to do. I realized in that vision that deception never comes looking like evil. It comes dressed as peace, progress, and power. It speaks the language of unity but hides the seed of destruction. I thought of how easily people follow what feels good, what seems logical, without stopping to ask, is this from God? Jesus turned to me with eyes full of fire and compassion. Jacob, he said, tell them to stay awake. Tell them that truth will not always be popular, but it will always be powerful. In that moment I understood. The final chapter of history would not begin with thunder or war, but with a lie that the world would gladly believe. The moment that man declared himself God, the world I saw through that vision began to unravel with terrifying speed. It wasn't a slow descent into chaos, it was like the flick of a divine switch. In a single day, everything changed. Jesus stood beside me, his face solemn, his voice steady. "Watch, Jacob," he said. "This is why I tell my people not to delay." I looked, and the earth itself seemed to shudder. Nations activated emergency powers. Screens everywhere broadcast one face the face of that false savior, speaking words of unity that sounded noble, but carried the poison of control. New laws appeared overnight, as if they had been waiting in secret drawers for this very moment. People lined up to receive new digital identifications promised as the key to safety, food, and peace. But behind that promise was a trap. The system wasn't about freedom, it was about allegiance. I saw algorithms sorting souls, databases separating those who bowed from those who wouldn't. And then I saw the believers. Some heard the news and ran immediately, families leaving everything behind, guided only by faith and an inner voice whispering, "Go now." They didn't stop to pack bags or gather possessions. They remembered what Jesus had said, "When you see this, flee." But others hesitated. Some tried to reason, to gather supplies, to convince loved ones who couldn't understand. And that hesitation, those few precious hours, made all the difference. Within the first day, the world's systems were fully under new command. I saw checkpoints rising on every street, drones scanning crowds, soldiers enforcing peace. Anyone whose records revealed a life of faith, a Bible app, a prayer group, a sermon watched online was suddenly labeled as a threat. Their names were already on lists, their movements tracked, their options gone. I turned to Jesus, heartbroken. "Lord, how can they survive this?" He looked at me, compassion glowing like fire in his eyes. "They survive not by planning but by obedience. The ones who trust my voice will find my provision." And I understood then faith was no longer about what we believed, but how fast we were willing to act on it. There's a moment when God says, "Move," and hesitation is the difference between deliverance and danger. As I watched the chaos unfold, a chilling truth settled deep in my heart. The enemy doesn't always conquer by force. He conquers by comfort, by convincing us there's still time. Friend, don't wait until it's convenient to obey God. When His Spirit says go, when He says stand, do it. Because when the world shakes and systems crumble, it won't be the planners who endure it. Will be the believers who listened, trusted, and moved when He called their name. In that vision, as the darkness swept over the world, Jesus turned to me and said, "Now, Jacob, let me show you what I have prepared for those who trust me completely." Suddenly, the scene shifted. The chaos of cities faded away, and before me stretched a vast wilderness, rugged mountains glowing under a golden dawn, deep canyons carved like rivers of time, cliffs of red stone standing like sentinels of eternity. It was breathtaking, silent, untouched by the madness consuming the world. "This," Jesus said, his voice filled with warmth, "is the refuge I have prepared for my people." I watched as streams of believers, men, women, children, moved across that barren landscape. They carried no luggage, no plans, just faith. They had left behind everything the world called security, yet somehow they lacked nothing. As they journeyed, angels appeared among them, strong, radiant beings, not the soft figures we imagine in paintings, but mighty protectors clothed in light. I saw one guiding a mother carrying her baby through a narrow canyon, another leading an old man up a steep path, steadying his trembling hands. When the people grew weary, food appeared where there had been none. Water flowed from cracks in the rock. I watched as a child, too weak to continue, was lifted by an angel who whispered words that made her smile again. Jesus looked at me and said, "Jacob, What I did in the desert for Israel, I will do again. Just as I sent manna from heaven and water from the rock, I will provide for my people in this place. It struck me deeply this wasn't just survival, it was communion. The wilderness wasn't a punishment, it was a sanctuary. The people who fled didn't just escape danger, they entered intimacy. There, stripped of everything the world had to offer, they discovered what could never be taken away, the presence of God. They worshipped in caves and sang in the valleys. There was no fear, no greed, no hunger, only peace that defied logic. I thought about how often we run from the wilderness in our own lives. We see it as a place of loss, but maybe, just maybe, it's the place where heaven meets earth most clearly. Sometimes God leads us away from comfort, not to harm us, but to show us that He alone is enough. Jesus smiled, and His words echoed through my spirit. Tell my people when the world collapses, I will still have a place of peace. It won't be found in the cities of man, but in the hearts of those who trust me. For 3.5 years, I will sustain them not by systems, but by my spirit. And as I watched the wilderness glow with the light of divine presence, I understood faith doesn't always take you to safe places, but it always takes you to holy ones. As the vision continued, I saw what life was like in that wilderness refuge, and it was nothing like what I expected. You'd think a place without cities, power, or possessions would be bleak, but it was the opposite. It was beautiful. There was a peace there that words can't fully describe, a kind of calm that went deeper than the absence of trouble. It was the presence of God Himself. I saw men and women who had fled their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs, now laughing, singing, worshiping under the open sky. They had no phones, no money, no plans, and yet, somehow, they had everything they needed. Food appeared when it was needed, water flowed from unexpected places, and strength came even to the weakest among them. It wasn't survival anymore, it was supernatural living. I watched as families sat around fires sharing whatever they had, no one claiming more than another. Children played freely, safe from harm. There was no envy, no pride, no fear, just unity. It struck me that these people had lost everything the world told them mattered, but they had found what truly did. They had given up comfort and discovered contentment. They had surrendered control and discovered freedom. This was what Jesus meant when He said, "Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." They had lost the temporary to gain the eternal. It made me think about how often we cling to things that can't really sustain us, our possessions, our status, our plans. We build our lives around what's visible, but in the wilderness of life, those things fall away and we're left with what's real. Maybe that's why God sometimes allows us to walk through seasons of lack, not to punish us, but to remind us that His presence is the only thing that truly fills us. In that vision, I saw worship rising like smoke from the camps in the valleys. No one was leading a service, no one was performing, it was just hearts overflowing in gratitude. People were singing not because life was easy, but because they had discovered joy that didn't depend on circumstances. And that joy, it was contagious. It spread through that wilderness like sunlight breaking through the morning fog. I realized then that heaven's idea of abundance is so different from ours. We chase after more, but in that place, enough was a miracle every day. They didn't just survive, they thrived, because God Himself was their provider, their teacher, their leader. The wilderness had become a temple, and the people had become a family. They were the ones who had learned the secret most of us spend a lifetime missing, that when you finally let go of everything else, you find the one thing that never leaves you, His presence. As the vision shifted, the peaceful wilderness faded, and I was taken back to the cities of the world. What I saw there chilled me to the core. Giant screens glowed across every nation, each one displaying the same face, the man who had once promised peace and unity. Now his voice filled the air like a command no one dared to question. His image appeared in every square, every home, every device. People bowed their heads, not out of love, but out of fear. This, Jesus said beside me, his tone both sorrowful and steady, is the rise of the beast. The world had fallen under the illusion that salvation had arrived, but it was a counterfeit salvation, a glittering trap. Then came the mark. At first it was presented as progress, a miracle of technology, a way to buy, sell, travel, and live without worry. A small imprint on the hand or forehead, a digital identification that promised safety, convenience, and belonging. But behind the shine of innovation was the shadow of allegiance. I saw crowds lining up willingly, unaware that they were signing away their souls. Those who refused were labeled dangerous, enemies of peace. They couldn't buy food, access medicine, or even enter their homes. The world's systems, its economy, its laws, its networks, all revolved around this one mark. And in that moment I realized this wasn't about technology, it was about worship. Jesus looked at me and said, "Those who take this mark choose the world over me." It's not a matter of survival, it's a matter of surrender. His words hit me like lightning. So many would fall, not because they were evil, but because they were unprepared. They would rationalize, compromise, tell themselves it was just a symbol, just a system. But in choosing comfort over conviction, they would lose what mattered most. Watching that scene, my heart broke for the families torn apart, parents pleading with children not to take it, spouses divided, friendships lost. Yet, amid the darkness, I saw a light. Small groups of believers, hidden in basements, caves, and forests, refusing to bow. Their faces were worn, but their eyes burned with unshakable faith. They had nothing left in the world's eyes, but in heaven's eyes, they possessed everything. I thought about how often, even now, we trade eternal values for temporary ease. We let fear guide our choices, thinking, it's just one small compromise. But friend, faith doesn't shrink in hard times, it stands. And that day, when the mark becomes the measure of loyalty, only those anchored in truth will endure. Jesus' voice echoed in my heart. The world may mark them as rejected, but I have marked them as mine. And I knew then real faith isn't proven in comfort, it's proven in the fire. The next scene I saw pierced my heart in a way I'll never forget. Beneath the glittering cities that had bowed to darkness, there was another world hidden, quiet, yet burning with light. It was the underground church. Small groups of believers met in basements, abandoned tunnels, and mountain caves, whispering hymns by candlelight. They had no pulpits, no programs, no microphones, just faith. I saw them passing small loaves of bread, praying over each other in trembling voices, and reading worn pages of scripture by the faint glow of a single lamp. They knew the cost of what they were doing. Every meeting could be their last. Yet they came, not out of fear, but out of love for God and for one another. I watched as these men and women risked everything to help those who had refused the mark. They shared food, hid families, smuggled supplies, and comforted the dying. They knew that to be caught meant arrest, torture, or execution, but their faith was stronger than their fear. There was something sacred about them, an unshakable courage that only comes when you've already surrendered everything. They didn't cling to life, they clung to eternity. Jesus' words echoed in my heart. They loved not their lives unto death. And I saw what he meant. Their faces glowed with peace, even as soldiers stormed their hiding places. Their lips whispered prayers, even as they were dragged into tribunals. They were not defeated, they were victorious in a way the world could never understand. I remember thinking how easy it is to be bold when life is comfortable, when faith costs us nothing. but real faith shines brightest when the night is darkest. These believers didn't have freedom or security, yet they had joy that the world couldn't crush. As each one fell, I saw their spirits rise, ascending into a brilliance so overwhelming it made heaven itself erupt in welcome. Angels met them with open arms, and Jesus himself stood to receive them, saying, "Well done, my faithful ones." They weren't forgotten, they were crowned. That vision changed how I see courage. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to love anyway. It's choosing to stand when it would be easier to bow. It's deciding that obedience matters more than safety. Friend, we may not face that kind of persecution today, but every day we face moments that test our faith, moments to choose conviction over convenience, truth over comfort. Those believers remind me, heaven takes notice of faith that stands firm. The world may call them martyrs, but heaven calls them heroes. And maybe, just maybe, God is calling us to live with that same quiet, unshakable courage, to stand firm, to love deeply, and to never be ashamed of the one who never gave up on us. Then the vision shifted again, and for a moment, everything went still. The darkness that had covered the earth trembled like it knew what was coming. Suddenly, the heavens opened, not quietly, not gently, but with a power that shook creation itself. I saw Jesus, radiant in glory, standing at the head of heaven's armies. His eyes burned with love and justice, his presence brighter than 1,000 suns. Behind him stretched countless angels, warriors of light, arrayed in perfect formation, their armor gleaming like living fire. The sound that filled the air wasn't chaos, it was victory. This was the moment the universe had been waiting for, the return of the King. I could feel it in my spirit. This wasn't a battle of equals. Evil had raged for centuries, boasting in its power, but now it stood trembling before its creator. The Antichrist and his armies gathered like shadows before the dawn, and I heard their shouts of defiance echo into the void. Yet when Jesus moved, everything bowed. With just a word, the darkness broke apart. With a breath, the armies of deceit scattered like dust in a storm. No sword was raised from heaven, only the power of truth, the authority of the one who spoke the stars into existence. And when it was finished, silence fell, not of fear, but of awe. Every knee bowed, every tongue confessed, willingly or not, that Jesus Christ is Lord. I saw the faithful, those who had endured, those who had loved him even unto death, rising to meet their King. Their faces shone with joy that no words could contain. Tears turned into laughter. The weight of suffering melted away like morning dew. Jesus looked at them, and his smile was the reward of every sacrifice. "Enter into the joy prepared for you," he said, and the heavens erupted in praise. This wasn't the end of a story, it was the beginning of forever. Watching that, I realized something that shook me to my core. Evil's reign had always seemed powerful, but in the presence of true righteousness, it had no substance. It was smoke trying to fight the wind. I thought of all the times we see injustice and wonder, when will God make it right? Friend, this was the answer. The day will come when every wrong is made right, when every tear is wiped away, when every faithful heart finds its home. That vision reminded me that our hope isn't in avoiding battles, it's in knowing how the story ends. The King is coming back, not as a humble carpenter, but as the triumphant Lord of all creation. And when he does, the light will win completely, beautifully, eternally. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed. Machines were beeping, doctors were shouting, but all I could hear was the echo of his voice still burning in my spirit. I had been gone for 17 minutes that changed everything I thought I knew about life and faith. The doctors called it a miracle, but I knew better. I hadn't just been revived, I had been sent back. Jesus had given me an assignment, a mission that couldn't wait, because time itself was running out. His words rang like thunder through my soul. Tell my people, Jacob, the time is shorter than they think. Since that day, I've carried the weight of that message like fire in my bones. I've seen what's coming. I've seen how quickly the world can shift, how fast the illusion of safety can collapse. And Jesus' instructions were crystal clear when that day arrives. When the abomination of desolation stands where it should not be, his people must move. No hesitation, no debate, no delay. Because obedience, in that moment, will mean life, the refuge. He showed me the wilderness filled with his provision, his angels. His peace is real, but only those who trust completely will find it. I'll be honest, when I first returned, I wondered, why me? I'm not a preacher. I'm not a scholar. I'm just a man who met Jesus face to face. But maybe that's the point. God doesn't always choose the qualified. He qualifies the willing. And this message isn't for the perfect or the powerful. It's for the prepared. It's for those whose hearts still listen when heaven speaks. Friend, the time of casual Christianity is over. This is not the season for lukewarm faith or half-hearted belief. It's the time to choose to stand fully with Christ, even when the world mocks you for it. Every day, I wake up with a renewed urgency in my heart. I see the signs unfolding all around us, technology racing ahead, morality fading, truth being redefined, and I hear that still, steady voice whispering, warn them, tell them to be ready. Jesus isn't asking for fear. He's calling for faith. He's not demanding panic. He's inviting preparation. So I tell you, as one who has seen both sides of eternity, open your Bible, not just your news feed. Pray, not just when you're desperate, but because your spirit needs to stay awake. Share this message, because someone you love might need it more than you know. The clock is ticking, but hope is not lost. When the world trembles, the faithful will stand. When the systems collapse, the kingdom will rise. And when that trumpet sounds, may he find us not afraid but ready.